My name is Anne Pasternak Slater, and I am the granddaughter of the Russian Impressionist artist Leonid Pasternak. Today I'm going to tell you about Leonid's relationship with Tolstoy. This was for him undoubtedly the most important spiritual, artistic and personal relationship in his life, apart from his relationships with his wife and children. The story starts in 1893. Leonid has arrived in Moscow with his new wife, Rosalia, in 1890. His first picture was bought by Tretьяков, and his reputation started with that éclat. In 1890, his first son was born, Boris. And Leonid was already getting various artistic engagements. And the most important of these was to join three other well-known artists, to illustrate a reissue of War and Peace, which had been written in the 1860s, and now Tolstoy wanted it to be distributed free with coloured illustrations by these artists. Leonid found great pleasure in choosing the scenes for his illustrations, but then he had difficulties because he couldn't find documentary evidence of local details, historical details, like the uniforms of the French and Russian armies, the fashions in high society, the furniture in the ballrooms of the time, these kinds of things. And they were, for Tolstoy at the time of writing, also important. So he told his colleagues about his worries, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about that. You can go and ask Tolstoy. He'll be able to help you." And he said, "No, I couldn't possibly. I'm not important enough. I'm just a beginning artist." And they said, "Okay, don't worry then. Tolstoy comes to see the vernissage of the pictures by the artists teaching in the Academy of Art, where Leonid had a job, and you can meet him there." And indeed, that is what happened. And Leonid tells the story himself in his memoirs. And now you're going to hear his account of this meeting.
Это было в 1893 году. Был чудный, яркий весенний день перед Пасхой на Страстной неделе. В залах Московского училища живописи, вояния и зодчества устраивалась очередная выставка передвижников. Как всегда перед открытием большой выставки, всюду царило суетливое движение. Стук молотков, визг гвоздей, выдергиваемых из ящиков, хлопанье досок о пол, говор рабочих — все это сливалось в непрерывный общий гул. Было ослепительно ярко и светло, как бывает весной в Москве. Именитые художники Москвы, а также приехавшие на открытие из Питера, в длинных шубах смело и широко шагали через ящики. Как начинающий, мало еще известный художник, я робко сжался где-то в стороне, давая дорогу шагавшим. И вдруг все стихло. Кто-то шел, что-то необычное продвигалось из двери в зал. В блузе, заложив ладони за ремень кушака, своей особой походкой, точно скользя и едва поднимая над полом ноги, Толстой, словно носся, приподняв голову и слегка подаваясь вперед верхней частью туловища. Быстро, бодро и легко шел он, выражая собою одно устремление вперед. Мгновенно кольцо вокруг Толстого рассеклось, и я очутился перед ним, обаятельным, светозарным. Не помня себя, растерянный, стоял я перед ним, и ладонь крупной отеческой руки, я помню ее теплоту и мягкость, пожимала мою руку.
Leonid managed to pull himself together by the end of the vernissage and went back to Tolstoy and said, "I'd like to show you some of my illustrations. I'm having problems with historical details." And Tolstoy was very welcoming and said, yes, come along next Friday. We have an open day. He didn't say that actually, but it was an open day when he received a jour fixe, they call them. And in a week's time, with his package of images under his arm, Leonid rang the bell at the Tolstoy house on the Homofniki in Moscow, the winter dwelling for the family, and was welcomed in and showed into a sort of reception room and left to wait. And he started looking rather anxiously at the two doors that were entrances into the room, and one was large and the other was small. And he thought, I think Tolstoy will come through the big door. And then the small door opened, which was the door to Tolstoy's study, and Tolstoy approached and welcomed him.
Своей характерной походкой он вошел в комнату. На нем была та же серая блуза. Бодрый и оживленный, он еще издали радостно поздоровался со мной. Увидав папку, доброжелательным голосом, с оттенком шутливости, он проговорил: «Ну вот, покажите-ка, поскорее показывайте, что вы принесли». Он придвинулся к лампе и взял акварель из моей руки. Она изображала первый бал Наташи, на котором Пьер Безухов знакомит ее с князем Андреем. На заднем фоне император Александр I с блестящей свитой появляется у входа в зал. Бал в полном разгаре, и в свете сияющих люстр все горит великолепием красок. Сначала Толстой не проронил ни слова. Потом вдруг обернулся в направлении большой белой двери и крикнул: «Таня, Таня, иди скорее сюда!» И только тогда, покачивая головой, обратился ко мне. Ведь вот как странно это бывает. Когда у белки уже нет зубов, ей преподносят орешки. А ведь когда-то, когда я писал «Войну и мир», я мечтал о таких иллюстрациях. Ведь вот, прекрасно, прекрасно. Легко стало на сердце. Милый, добрый старец, подумал я, и даже слегка напоминает моего отца. И волосы его зачесаны, как у моего отца, на затылке, с локоном над ухом.
The visit went down so well that Leonid lost all his anxieties. He made friends with Tolstoy's two daughters who were present at this occasion and who talked to him as other guests came and went. They were Tatiana and Maria. And at the end of the evening, when he was leaving, Tolstoy said, "You must come again soon, and in the summer, do come and visit us in Yasnaya Polyana." So in the following months, Tolstoy welcomed Leonid to his house on many occasions, and Leonid drank in what he could see, but he was still too shy and self-deprecating to ask whether he could draw Tolstoy. He just watched him and stored up a kind of vocabulary of his curves and angles. And when the summer came, Leonid was able to visit him in Yasnaya Polyana. And at that point, the next stage of this intimacy happened. Leonid had gone for a stay of several days, and about 2 or 3 days in, Tolstoy had been writing in his study, and then he came out and he said to Leonid and to another guest, "Oh, well, I want to stretch my legs now. Why don't you come with me and we can have a walk, or we can do some mowing together." And indeed, as soon as they were outside and reached the fields, Tolstoy started mowing, and Leonid described what happened next.
Когда мы дошли до луга, он сбросил пальто и, не прерывая разговора, начал косить. Он очень хорошо владел косою, и, несмотря на свои годы, ловко, сильными и привычными движениями косил, как настоящий косарь-крестьянин, так быстро, что невозможно было хотя бы на мгновение увидать целиком всю позу. Устав, Толстой снова накинул на плечи пальто, взял косу, и мы втроем направились к дому. Вдруг Лев Николаевич обратился ко мне. «Леонид Осипович, есть у вас время? Хотите зайти ко мне?» Едва мы зашли в комнату, как Лев Николаевич, не снимая с плеч пальто, я так и нарисовал его, поставил косу в угол, зажег свечу и с обычной мягкой интонацией своей обратился ко мне. «Я вам хотел прочесть кое-что, пожалуйста, присаживайтесь». Я сел, и Лев Николаевич стал читать. Я слушал чтение и одновременно напряженно вглядывался в красоту всей этой особенной обстановки, стараясь удержать ее в памяти. Освещенная одной свечкой комната, косые тени, живописные пятна и передо мной читающий великий автор. Все это увлекало глаз мой как художника, и я впитывал впечатления, запоминал все формы и светотени и все детали комнаты.
This is the image that Leonid fixed in his mind as he watched Tolstoy reading the manuscript of a story which he found very funny but couldn't really remember properly. His eyes were busy more than his ears. And in this finished drawing of the occasion, you can see the curved ceiling of the underground room that has, well, it was a saddle room, a storeroom, but it was also, at that time, Tolstoy's study. And you can see the light from the candle and a whole series of patterns tracing the lapels of his heavy greatcoat, which he threw off his shoulders and draped on the chair, mirrored in the shadow that is falling across his brow and down our left side of his head. And then you can see the same pattern on the wall behind him. And this is absolutely characteristic of Leonid's graphic art. He is a great draftsman, and the boldness of the shadows and the brightness of the unshadowed, light-filled spaces and the confidence of his strokes are absolutely characteristic of his art. It's a wonderful drawing, but in fact Leonid was too shy about it, and initially the finished picture that he made public was an oil painting in which we have a larger view of the scene, and there is an observer who is listening, and for that Leonid introduced one of the fellow guests who was not invited into the study, but was a more important person than he was. Over the next 5 years, between 1893 and 98, Leonid had plenty of opportunities to study Tolstoy and his family, and to make numerous sketches of them. The daughters reassured him that of course he can always draw Tolstoy, who would like to be drawn by him. And Leonid no longer pretended that he wasn't doing anything, and he allowed himself to sketch all the time. And sometimes Tolstoy would even said, shall I sit for you for a bit? So we have a kind of vocabulary of what Tolstoy looked like in motion, informally, which is much, much more vital than a portrait that Leonid made of him to accompany the War and Peace illustrations in 1893. This image is stilted. This is a fictional portrait of the young author of War and Peace 30 years earlier. It's not the real thing. You look at it and you think, I don't find this interesting. It's not as interesting, it's not as vital, it's not as essential as these quick sketches that give us the posture of the man, the fact that he is old, he's thinking, he's moving, he's outgoing, he's alive, he's not a model. Leonid also was watching the rest of the family. He has a lovely description of Tolstoy's wife, Sofia Andreevna. He says she was very short-sighted. So she had a lorgnette that would hang on a chain round her neck always, and she would raise it to peer very closely at what she was looking at. Most of the time it was Tolstoy's manuscripts, and then drop it and sit back and look ahead. And he's got some lovely sketches of her as well. I'd like to come back to the meeting of Leonid with Tolstoy at the Vernissage in 1893. At that point in his memoirs, he says, I had a revelation of the figure before me. And he describes it in the following words.
Вдруг я почувствовал его ласковость, его простота, результат духовной работы над собой и над обузданием громадного темперамента. Я видел вспышки и блеск молнии. Я видел грозу с рокотавшими за тучами, заглушенными раскатами грома. Этого Толстого я старался изобразить потом на моем портрете в профиль, на фоне бурного неба.
This image is striking in the sense precisely that Tolstoy is not just a small human figure, but a force of nature. The lines of the engraving in the stormy sky behind him are part of the lines on his face in the drawing. The hatching is not cross-hatching, it's all flowing in turbulent lines, and also caressing lines. The face is full of motion, like a waterfall or a high wind in the sky. And that really was Leonid's final encapsulatory image of Tolstoy, an image that was later shared by his son Boris. When Tolstoy died, his wife, Sofia Andreevna, summoned Leonid to come and draw him on his deathbed at the stop of a railway station. Leonid took Boris with him, and this is what Boris saw.
В комнате лежала гора. Комнату занимала грозовая туча в полнеба. Но в углу лежала не гора, а маленький сморщенный старичок. Один из сочиненных Толстым старичков. Место было кругом утыкано высокими елочками.